welcome. You're watching the WION-VOA co-production with me, Alison Lagrange. Let's get started. Now, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the military and private citizens started using Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink satellite internet connection, providing high-speed internet connections in situations with no ground-based infrastructure. Starlink became a key to Ukraine's resistance. From Kyiv, Myroslava Gongadze has the story. Listen in.
In this apartment on the outskirts of Kyiv, engineer Oleg Kutkov started testing Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink internet connection long before the war. The thousands of small satellites that makes Starlink were first sent into space in 2019. Kutkov, a self-proclaimed space nerd who immigrated to Kyiv after Russians occupied Crimea in 2014, was fascinated by the newest space technology.
I started to following this project from the beginning when it just launched. So I decided that it would be nice to try to receive the signal from Starlink. Just to receive and maybe to analyze to see what is it?
Starlink doesn't require any ground infrastructure, just a small satellite dish and a receiver device to access high-speed internet. Starlink was not yet available in Ukraine in 2021, so Kutkov bought a device on eBay and started experimenting. 2 days after Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, Mikhailo Fyodorov, Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, tweeted to Elon Musk, saying in part, "While your rockets successfully land from space, Russian rockets attack Ukrainian civil people. We ask you to provide Ukraine with Starlink stations." Elon Musk replied to him within hours, saying Starlink service is now active in Ukraine. Within days, dark gray boxes with small flat dishes began to arrive in Ukraine. By May, around 150,000 people were using the system.
I didn't realize that in February or in March, maybe 1 week or 2, but then my messages exploded basically because everyone is writing me about Starlink. People asked how to connect, what that should do, and so on.
Soon after, the Ukrainian military started using the SpaceX technology on a massive scale. Starlink became a window to the world for soldiers on the front line and a key component in military operations. Kutkov thinks that even SpaceX could not predict how useful Starlink would be to the war effort. Here at the northern border of Ukraine and elsewhere, Starlink provides the most stable communication connection for military operations, military officer Oleksiy Shevchuk says.
There are no alternatives for Starlink. It is our eyes and ears, and we rely on it greatly.
Although the Russian forces are fully aware of Starlink's capabilities, it is almost impossible to block its signal. For almost a year, Kutkov's apartment balcony office has become a Starlink repair shop where soldiers from the front line come for help. Kutkov fixes Starlink receivers and dishes, sometimes with bullets holes in them. An example of how private citizen can help the war effort.
I do it for free in my spare time. Yeah, because I have my job that my primary job that I'm doing in the daytime, and in the nighttime I'm doing all my Starlink repair and support work.
For his effort, Kutkov ended up with Ukrainian President Zelensky on the cover of Time magazine. And Starlink is not the only Elon Musk company technology Oleg adopted. Almost daily, he jumps in his Tesla to drive to the postal office to send back the fixed equipment to soldiers. He sees it as his way to serve and hopes one day to return home to Crimea. Myroslava Gongadze, VOA News, Kyiv.
Joining us now with more analysis is VOA's Jessica Stone. She joins us live from the White House. Hello to you, Jessica. Now, the top U.S. defense officials are in Germany today to meet with their counterparts from 50 other nations for a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. Kyiv has made a number of requests. What's the status of those talks?
Well, the Pentagon is going into these talks really under the belief that they need to make sure that Kyiv is ready for what they believe will be a Russian spring offensive. And so the conversations that are taking place at this meeting center around what types of weapons to provide to Kyiv. And Kyiv, of course, has already asked for and received at least 2 systems of Patriot missiles from both Germany and from the United States. The key ask and contention at this meeting is really around heavy tanks. Kyiv has also asked for those, and the French and the British have sent tanks to them, but the Germans have not. They've been holding out and saying that they will not send them until the United States sends them. There's been no resolution on that, and that's part of the conversation going on at these meetings. The contact group is also expected to discuss during these meetings the delivery of arms to Ukraine and just how quickly they can get them once they're granted by the country that's donating them. Back to you.
Right, Jessica. Now, the United States began training Ukrainian soldiers on the Patriot missile systems. What can you tell us about how that's going?
Yeah, that appears to have begun on Monday of this week. The Ukrainians being trained at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is the outpost that trains American soldiers. We understand that the Ukrainian soldiers are going to be trained completely separately from any American soldiers, but they brought about 90 Ukrainians to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to begin the training. That's about the number that it takes to operate these systems, and it's going to be going on for the next several months, according to Pentagon officials. It takes some time, actually, to get these Ukrainians trained on this. Washington and Berlin, of course, have each announced that they are granting a request by Kyiv to give Patriot missile systems to Ukraine. And that's particularly important to protect Ukrainian critical infrastructure, power grids, hospitals, schools, because some of those have been the targets of Russian missile strikes. Allison?
Right, Jessica, stay with us while we take a look at our next story. Now, the George W. Bush Institute in Texas has ranked the metropolitan areas across America where it says immigrants are being embraced and thriving. VOA's senior Washington correspondent Carolyn Persutti shows us how Colorado Springs, Colorado, typically a conservative town, made the list.
Karthik Raghunath Palanimalai is a software consultant. After he arrived in the U.S. on an L1 tech visa, he says he got no help from Colorado Springs to get settled. Instead, he relied on the city's Indian American community.
They helped me to get to the apartments and, to the work nearest to the place, and then the grocery shops or whatever things. So they really helped me for the first 3 months.
Jackie Jaramillo of Centro de la Familia says newcomers like Palanimalai are often invisible and isolated.
It's very difficult. There are a lot of institutional barriers and there are cultural barriers. There's definitely racism. A lot of the immigrants that we serve are victims of crime.
That's why some found it surprising when the George W. Bush Institute ranked the city 21st out of the top 100 metro areas in the U.S. where immigrants are thriving. Colorado Springs is best known for the U.S. Air Force Academy and for Pikes Peak at 4,300 meters. The city government is largely conservative, and most Republicans are outspoken about stopping illegal border crossings.
I don't think we have a sign up that says, Colorado Springs, great place for migrants.
John Suthers is a staunch Republican and two-term mayor of Colorado Springs. In 2022, the Milken Institute ranked the city 9th in economic performance among large U.S. cities, an enticement for highly skilled authorized immigrants.
Military defense is about 40% of our economy. There's an awful lot of jobs in the related high-tech, space, cybersecurity, and things like that. And those are areas where I think a lot of our people who are migrating legally have the expertise in, and so they're looking around. Why wouldn't you come to Colorado Springs?
Colum Clark wrote the George W. Bush Institute's report, Immigrants and Opportunity in America's Cities. He says several factors were considered in the rankings list.
Is it a good place to do business, to start a company? Is it a good place to kind of get ahead career-wise? Is it a good place to afford a home?
To that, Palanimalai says yes. His new wife, who also landed a tech job, joined him in Colorado Springs, where they're enjoying the Rocky Mountain life, along with a little bit of home, like playing on the local cricket team. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Now we still have with us Jessica Stone, the VOA correspondent. Jessica, back to you now. It's been close to a generation since the United States Congress passed major immigration legislation. Is Washington any closer to answers now?
We are certainly seeing more pressure being brought to bear by those record numbers of migrant crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border on the conversation here in Washington. One of the ways we know that is that a prominent Republican Texas Senator, John Cornyn, who is really a deal maker in Congress, he was part of a very politically difficult passage of gun safety legislation in the last Congress. He is now taking tours of senators to the border, and for the first time in many years, they are bipartisan. He just took 10 of them to the border in the last few days. They are now in conversation about coming to some kind of proposal to put before the Senate on immigration reform, and often this breaks down along security and immigration path to citizenship lines. But you know, we are in a different Congress. We know that the House is now run and has a majority of Republicans, and what that means is that anything that passed the Senate still has to pass the House, and there are certainly many more hardline against immigration Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives now. Many of the five that really held up the McCarthy House speakership to the 15 votes that we've been reporting on are hardline on immigration. They ran campaigns where they said they would keep people from coming across the border. And so that remains to be seen whether or not there can really be a conversation with the House. Keep in mind, this is just an indication of how hardline some of these Republicans are. They are looking at impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, who is the chief immigration enforcer, really, the head of the Department of Homeland Security. So it is not a great environment on the House side, but certainly something could come of John Cornyn's efforts in the Senate, and we'll be watching it.
Right, and we've also been following the Biden administration's efforts to reduce the number of migrants surging to the U.S.-Mexico border. Earlier this month, the White House rolled out an app for migrants who want to file for asylum. What's the latest on this?
Well, the app actually went live last week, and we've already seen evidence that immigrants are using it. In fact, Reuters captured some video that we can put up for you now of immigrants that are coming to the border after having applied through this app for an asylum appointment inside the United States. Now, one of the criticisms of the process is often they are asked to go to another location outside of the United States to make the crossing, and it may not be that close to them. So immigration advocates say they need to improve that, offer more appointments so that people have less movement after they've taken very long journeys in many cases from Central and South America into Mexico. But this is underway. It is part of the process, and so far we are seeing that it is something that is at least going the way it's supposed to go. This, of course, is the part of the Biden administration's solution to lessening the number of migrants who simply try to come to the border and then ask for asylum, overwhelming not only the processing facilities at the border, but the whole immigration judge system. And so these record numbers are really forcing that conversation. We had 2.7 million migrants come across the border and encounter Border Patrol agents just in the last fiscal year alone. So this is one way the Biden administration is trying to stem the tide. Allison?
Absolutely. Jessica, thank you very much for being with us and all your valuable analysis there.